Right, starting a new project, something I've had in mind for a little while and I've been toying with. I've done a couple of designs. I used Excel because actually doing the simple block designs I wanted for these was going to be quite easy on Excel. And I want to play with the layout. And basically what I want to do is I want to make a Pacman and a sort of ghost from the Pacman game as a complementary pair. I've got these couple of wood blanks that I turned wet and turned them round. Yeah, coming on for 1.5 years old now. They've been drying, so they should be good and dry. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get them up and rounded and turn the tenon on these ends, because the tenons themselves have gone a bit oval. As you can see, the blank itself is quite oval. So, having roughly trued everything, I've put a new tenon on this end, I've swapped it round, and now I'm just going to try and get all this into round on the new tenon and re-round the old tenon so it matches, because that's still a little bit on the oval side, and then hopefully we'll have true stock to start turning from. Okay, so that's pretty much trued up. I want the blocks to be, roughly speaking, as wide as they are long, which I've more or less got there. I'm just going to get a ruler and check. At this point it doesn't need to be pinpoint accurate, but that's roughly what we're aiming for. So yeah, I've still got plenty of meat on the width of that. I'll turn that away on the final project. So I'll get the other section true and then we'll start the actual turn. Okay, so here's the printout I'm going to be using as my guidance. Pacman Inky, name of this ghost. What I've done is basically done a scale grid, so this could be any size you wanted to. This could be, as it's 15 by 15 in Pacman's case and 14 in Inky's case. This grid could be any size you wanted it to be. If you want to scale it up, that could be a foot a square. If you want to do a really monstrous one, wouldn't get on the lathe. So I'm measuring up my material and I've got about 11 centimetres to play with in either direction. So 11, roughly divided out, gives me squares of 7.5 by 7.5. So what I've done is made myself a little scale, again using Excel because it's very easy to set the dimensions of the box and print them out. On a little scale, so I can follow through my plan and create each of the indents when I need to. First thing I need to do though is get this down to the width it should be, which is that 11 centimetres depth, as it were, across the radius, diameter of the piece. So I need to mark that up, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to set my calipers approximately to 7.5 units, half of the 15 of the full width of the piece. And again, this is just an arbitrary system, but it's the rule I'm using. So 7.5 mil squares, and I'm using 7.5 of them to create the width of the piece. To mark in the diameter, I'm going to use the centre that I've created with the spur, and I'm just going to, in this case, hand turn it to create the diameter. So you can see I've got a couple of centimetres of material I need to cut away to get down to my 15. Just to help me out, I'm going to highlight that line with a pencil. Okay, so there's my target line, which gets me a piece of timber roughly 11 centimetres across. Okay, so I'm going to work that down and then we're ready to start actually shaping the piece. Right, it's because I think it's going to be the easiest of the two to do. I'm going to do Inky the Ghost first, and I've left myself just a bit shy of the line when I did that cut down, just so I can now do some finishing cuts. This is actually my bowl gouge, which makes quite a nice finishing cut. So I'm going to do a light pass over and see if I can get rid of some of this tear out. I reckon about half of this, just over half of this, is going to be the final body width, so I want it to look nice and finished and get rid of as much of this tear out as possible, and I can start shaping in the head. In fact, what I'm going to do, I think, on this piece is I'm going to turn this round before I do the shaping, and I'm going to make this the head and that the base, and I want to work on the base first, because then I'll be able to clamp up inside it without having to have a tenon on it anymore. So let's do that first. As the key to a good finish is a good sharp gouge, which I've just hand sharpened, and a nice slow cut. I'm just going to take this gouge and see if I can do a nice finishing cut, get rid of some of this torn end grain, and just get this into a good nick, ready for the final project. Right, now that is indeed a lot better, so I'm going to do another pass, just get rid of the last of this torn end grain, and then we should be pretty much ready to go. And that's just about perfect. Okay, that's my interesting scale ruler set now, so I know where I want to be. So Inky has 10 squares, so counting back to square 5, 10 of his squares are the size of his body. So it's only squares 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5 that I need to put indents into. So I'm going to start off by marking where square 5 falls, 4, 3, 2 and 1, and then I'm going to start parting in just to establish some shapes. I've got a line to follow. Okay, I'm using my measure again, my tape measure that I made. So I put the centre on line 15, which puts the edge on just about line 7.5, 8, so gives me a rough centre scale there. What I'm going to do first is get rid of this centre nub and get the bottom flat, and then I can start laying out where the individual grooves are going to run. Right, so I just line up my tape measure again, and now I need to lay out where these trenches effectively are going into the base of the piece. So let's go 1 unit in, 2, 3 units in, and then another one. Will you do that? Yeah, that'll look about right. Alright, we've got a little bit of a catch there, and that's knocked everything out of true. Right, so I'm going to try a different tool, I think, to cut into this end grain, because it's proving to be quite tough and a little bit catchy. tighten this chuck up. Maybe a slightly slower approach with the parting tool might work. No, this ash is tremendously hard. So I think it's back to using the sorry, finish my sentences. Okay, this ash is tremendously hard, so I think it's back to using that square carbide cutter, but just being very gentle with it, and see if we can make some progress. Okay, I'm aiming for this recess to be 7mm deep, 7.5mm deep, in fact, to match the size of the pixels for this piece. And as usual, I can't find the tool I'm looking for when I'm looking for it. So I'm going to have to use this, which means we are still a couple of mil off, slightly deeper on the inside. I can't find my calipers, they do such a nice job. Definitely time for a spring clean. These catches are going to drive me crazy. Never mind. The advantage of jaws is it's reasonably easy to get things back on centre. Right, let's have a measure. And that's pretty well spot on. So I think I'm going to go in a bit more gently, so if I can clean that up, get rid of the catch marks, just using a skew chisel, and then I'll be ready to start hollowing the next bit. Because this piece is going to sit when it's finished on this rim, and the general rule of whether you're creating a bowl or anything you want to sit flush on a surface is to have a bit of a concave. I'm just making sure this inner ring is just that fraction lower, so it won't make contact with the table. It'll only be this outside ring, but I still want to get that centre just a little bit lower. That's perfect. The centre ring's just that 0.5 mil lower and feels right in height. Now I've got to try and see if I can get the centre holes in. This might be a bit trickier. I'm going to try doing this with a parting tool. I'm just going to give that a bit of a sharpen up before I do. Okay, well that's scorching more than cutting. Try a very fine parting tool, but I'm not sure that's going to create quite the effect I'm after. Let's have a go. Okay, well that's working a lot better than I thought it would do. Maybe not quite as clean a cut as I'd like. It's moments like this you're tempted to run off and make a new tool, but I think I'll avoid the temptation. Just Just see if I can gently work that into the shape that I want it. And I think we may have to just drill the centre hole to get the effect. Just a little bit deeper, I think. Okay, that's not bad at all. Right, I want to see if I can just gently finish that with the parting tool. Try not to scorch again. Well, that's sort of what I want. It's going to be a bit of a pig to sand, but maybe I'll have to get inventive with that. Whether I'm going to bother actually putting the centre hole in, being as he's not going to get seen underneath much, only when he's handled. But I'm more tempted, I have to say, just to leave that alone. Right, so I'm going to try and sand up the bottom, get it in as good nick as possible. Not trying to avoid rounding over these edges as much as possible. I think I'll be mounting my sandpaper to a sanding block wherever possible, and I'll be back after I've sanded it. Okay, I've sanded as best I can. It's quite fiddly getting inside all this detail here and not rubbing all the corners off it, but it still wants to feel good to the touch. So I'm going to spin it round now and start working on the head. Time to get the rings cut into the top. So using my plan, I can measure the width, and the calipers set against scale. I can measure the width of each piece and mark them on. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take down this tenon and just leave it a little nub so I can centralise things, the calipers, and keep using the tailstock, sorry. And then I'm going to cut each ring in turn down to size, and we should be pretty well there. Right, so referring to my plan, the first section is 4 units wide, the very top of the head. There's my target, so I can smooth up and flatten off the top and then take that ring down to size. And the next ring is actually 4, so that's 8 units wide. Going to take this nub in the centre down a little bit, just to make it a bit easier. Just realised my mistake, I'm doing this too wide. So that first ring, yes, it should be 4 units wide, but only 2 radius wide. So my next ring is 8 wide, therefore 4 units in radius. Okay, so my next one down is only 1 unit bigger, so that's up to 5 units, 10 across. I'm going to add just a little bit for that to reach down from the top. And the last 2 rings I've got to cut, both go to the same niche, so just 1 unit in. So these 2 I can just take down. Again, I think I'm going to have to visualise now, there's such a step I've introduced. In fact, if I use that guide I might do a little bit better at this point. That's what I put it there for. So centre's 2 units, that's fine. And it should have been another 2 units, which it is, and 1 unit. That probably needs to come in just a touch, and the final units come in 1 as well. So they're going to be approximately there. Okay, time to do a little sanding. I'll be back in a bit. So I'm going to stain this. It's just using some spirit stain. The last of what I've got is blue. Let's hope I've got enough. The way I found works best with this is partly to do it on the lathe. I've got a slightly dilute version of that, trying to make it stretch a little bit. What I tend to use is a bit of old sponge. Just cut out what I need. The sponging seems to make it go on more evenly. I've now put a couple of coats of blue spirit stain on this and got it much as I want it. The next little job is to try and put the eyes in. So there's a number of ways I could do this. I could just glue templates on, and that would be the eye. And I might have a look at that once I've done it, because I'm going to use these a different way. The other option is to glue them on, and then I'm going to use the Dremel tool to grind away the white areas and reveal the original wood colour. And then I'll probably black paint these with a bit of paint to give the impression of the eye. And what I'm going to do is cut these out and glue them on with some spray adhesive. So I can hopefully get them off again, and we'll see how this goes. Okay, this really is just a guesstimate at this point of roughly where I want things. So I'm just going to get those squared quite like that. I'm going to let the adhesive set up for a bit, and then we'll see if we can carve away with the Dremel. Right, well, here goes nothing. Let's see if we can define these eyes. Okay, so what I've done is just gone around the outline of the white and the pupil, and now I'm going to get rid of the sticker, because hopefully I've got an adequate mark now on the wood itself. There we go. So I'm just going to try and clean that up a bit. It's not come out too bad, it's a bit wobbly. If I can deepen it up and just try and neaten that a bit, and then do the other one. Right, so same with the other eye. I'm just going to try and define and square that up a bit. Okay, so that was a sort of straight burr. I'm now going to try and define the inner bit of the eye with this little round burr to work away. We'll see how we get on. I think we might even change. There's a number of options on the burrs, and I'm still learning what I'm doing with this. I haven't done much, but in fact I think I'm going to go up to the bigger one. Just hopefully so it does a bit more of an even job. you know what, I'm going to leave it. This is really just a prototype, so I'm learning a lot. Alright, well, because it's something I'm more familiar, I think I'm going to try initially to do the eyeballs of the permanent marker. Let's see what that looks like, because I can always go over it with the paint. I don't like the result I get. I've already put the first coat on, but very carefully. I'm using sanding sealer, but unfortunately because of the way that's diluted, it does tend to liberate a little bit of the colour from the wood. So I'm having to be very careful to just dab the eyes and not to get that black elsewhere. And then I think in this case I'll be able to just turn it and carefully work the sanding sealer into the rest of the piece, and it does liberate the blue on it. But if I'm careful, I don't try and avoid any cross contamination between the two. We should be fine. I do like the way that's coming up. Obviously better not to use the stuff straight from the bottle at this point. It's never a good thing because of the risk of contamination, but particularly on dyed timber you definitely will get contamination. As you can see, the cloth does tend to get saturated with the sanding sealer. So I'm just going to wipe this reasonably liberally on, and then I'll give it a little bit of a sand down between coats, just gently with 400 grit. We should be finished. So there we have, with a couple of coats of sanding sealer all polished down and some friction polish put on. Then we have the finished product. Reasonably pleased with it. If anybody's got any suggestions in the comment about how to do the eyes neater, but I think maybe just a bit more practice with the Dremel tool will improve those. And I sort of like the shape and the way he's come out. The next thing will be, of course, to make up the actual Pacman himself, who, although will be similar, will have a few little design issues of his own that I've been trying to work through in advance, but we'll see how we get on. Anyway, that's Inky. Next video, Pacman.